Hi, I'm Ike from IkesOutdoors.com, and in this video I'm going to show you everything you need to know to get a bare bow set up and ready to go hunt, shoot 3D, or whatever the shooting sport of your choice is. The first half of this video is going to show you how to set up that bow from start to finish and show you all the tuning methods that I know of. And I'm also going to show you the tuning methods of those. I'm going to show you the ones that I personally use. The second half of this video is going to be more like bonus features. I'm going to show you different sights. I'm going to show you different rests. I'm going to show you different releases, different stabilizers, how to build and fletch an arrow. Pretty much anything I can think of that will be handy for you to have. I'm going to try, the way I'm approaching this video is to try to give you enough knowledge to go work in a shop or to do all of your own work at home. This is basically the way I would train someone if they were to come into my shop and get a job working with me. To make it easier for you guys to follow along in this video, I'm going to define the different parts of the bow. That way, as we go along, you'll know what I'm talking about. The first thing we're going to show you is the string. The string's where you're going to attach your release. It's where you're going to have your D-loop. It's where you're going to have your peep sight. And you'll know the string is going to be the furthest away from the handle. It's going to come off the back side of your cams. And just for the purposes of this video, we're simply going to call these the cables. There are a lot of different names for these, and a lot of different kinds of these depending on the cam system of your bow. For the purposes of this video, we're going to use just the name cables to describe these. And this is a 2015 Elite Synergy. So that, it's got a binary cam on it, but there are a lot of different bows out there and a lot of different cam systems. When it comes to cams, your cams are on the bottom and on the top on a dual cam bow. On a single cam or solo cam bow, you're going to have a cam on the bottom and you're going to have an idler wheel on the top. But this right here is your cam. There's a couple different parts of the cam that you're going to need to know, and this piece right here that protrudes out is your stop. It's your draw stop. It can be a limb stop or it can be a cable stop, which we'll cover later on in the video. But that is your draw stop. The other thing is your module. There are going to be a couple different kinds of modules that we're going to discuss at the end of this video. This, unless it's a draw specific cam, it's going to have a module to change your draw length. So this module sits right here. The next part that we want to talk about is the limbs. The limbs are available in different poundage, and this is what sets the poundage of your bow. So different limbs are going to make your bow a different poundage, 50 to 60, 60 to 70, 70 to 80, or whatever. The next part is the limb bolt. This limb bolt right here is going to be used to adjust the poundage on your bow. This piece right here is your limb pocket. This is basically just going to cradle your limb and make sure it's properly supported during the draw cycle. This piece right here is your riser, and there are a lot of different parts to the riser, but the piece from limb pocket, the limb pocket is known as the riser. So a couple different components on the riser. We're going to have a sight window, and the sight window sits right here from your shelf. Your shelf is going to be this piece right here up to here, and it allows you to be able to see your sight, get your rest set up. But this cutout right here is going to be called your sight window. You're going to have two holes, usually two, sometimes more, holes right here that are drilled and tapped for your sights, which we're going to show you how to mount up later. And this is an important one because I'm going to be saying this later on as we set up the rest. This is your burger hole. This is where the rest sets up and where the rest mounts on your bow. This part right here, like I said just a second ago, is the shelf. This is where your rest is going to come down, where your arrow is going to sit in the middle of your shelf. It's basically going to cradle your arrow when it's in the down position if you're using a drop away rest. The next piece is the handle, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's where your hand goes during the shot. So down up here, one more piece is the cable guard. This piece that comes out is the cable guard. This piece right here is the cable slide. As you draw this bow back, the cable slide is going to work down the cable guard, and as you shoot it, it's going to come back, keeping these cables free from obstruction, keeping them from getting tangled up, keeping them from rubbing on each other. This piece right here is your string stop. Almost every bow that is made today is going to have a string stop on it. This reduces the shock and vibration that transfers to the riser and the bow. It basically decelerates the string as it comes forward and stops your string, just like the name describes. Usually got a rubber piece on the end, sometimes has a rubber dampener up here closer to the riser. The next piece we have here is where your stabilizer goes. Sometimes this is drilled and tapped into the riser itself. Sometimes, like on this Elite, it has an insert that actually goes in there. That's where your stabilizer is going to go. And it's all a standard thread. Any stabilizer is going to fit into that industry-wide. And on some of these bows, you're going to see a spot in the back that's drilled and tapped as well. That spot on the back is for a target setup. It's for V-bars and sidebars and different stuff like that. The last thing I'm going to show you is on your string. You're going to have some bows are going to have speed knocks. These right here are speed knocks. They do add a little bit of speed to your bow if installed properly, and it will reduce a little bit of vibration. Also, you've got a rubber piece here, a couple rubber pieces here, and a rubber piece here. Those are for reducing vibration as well. Below, you're going to see a wide range of tools. I'm going to show you the tools that you're going to have, and I'm going to show you some tools that are just nice to have and are going to make doing some of this work a little bit more convenient. The first set of tools I have here is just a set of Allen wrenches. Other than my bow press, this is going to be the #1 tool that we're going to use. I have two sets here. One is a little bit longer and a little bit larger. These are 5/64 through 1/4. That's for changing drawaway and tightening bolts down, stuff like that. This other set is a 1/16 through 7/32. That one's for setting up rest, adjusting sights, doing smaller stuff like that you really don't want to put a lot of torque on, and you need the smaller sizes for. The next tool is just a standard tape measure. This is going to be used for measuring brace height, measuring center shot, measuring axle to axle, just all kinds of different measurements. Next, we have a draw weight scale, which is really, you're going to have a draw weight scale of some kind. This here is an arrow scale for arrow weight. It's not really necessary. You can do the addition in your head, the multiplication, and figure out what your arrows weigh. But to make sure you're staying at the correct arrow weight, I highly recommend a grain scale. Next thing we're going to talk about here is just a marker. These are a couple sets of metallic markers. I like these because they show up on the black string. They show up really well. This is for marking where your D loop's going to go, for marking, you know, your peep sight location, anything you need to mark on your bow. A couple of these are going to come in really, really handy. This is an arrow square, and the arrow square helps you locate by lining this up with the burger holes. You can set not only your rest elevation, but you can also set your D-loop point. So that's a really handy tool and pretty much a must-have for me. Pair of needle nose pliers. This is used for when you're tying D-loops, getting that initial stretch on them. Really easy to get that, to slip that in there when that D-loop's really small and tight, and just open these up and get a little bit of stretch on them. This is for finishing them out. This is just a pair of D-loop pliers. You put this on your string, open that up, and that's going to open up your D-loop for you and get it completely stretched out. This here is another thing you're going to need, just a lighter. That's for burning the end of your D-loops, burning the ends of your serving material. Last thing probably on the have-to-have list is a string separator. This is really nice to have. Really does just exactly what the name says, is actually separate the strings so you can get in there and put your peep sight in, or put your cord from your rest in. Another thing that we got here is just some serving. This is just .018 ELS Diamond Black jig spool. This is made by BCY. This is what I use for serving in peep sights, for serving in rests, just general purpose stuff like that. So that's pretty much your have-to-have tools right there. The rest of this stuff is stuff that's really nice to have, but stuff that you're not really going to have anymore. This is a slide rule. This is really handy for setting up and measuring arrows, because you can bump it up right up against the riser, and you can slide this over and bump it right up against the outside of the arrow on the front and back. Make sure your arrow is in the correct position. You don't see these much anymore. They don't come into play much anymore. This is for putting on brass knocks. So this is a set of knocking pliers. I still keep them around because there's still some people who like to use them, and there's occasionally I'll get a bow in that'll have a brass knocking point on there, and these are really handy to have to remove those. This is a set of forceps. I'm sure there's some other term for them, but bought these in the fishing section. When you're doing serving or you need to hold something to get your hands free, these are really handy to have to just clamp on that and hold that in place while you're doing something else. Bowstring wax. This is made by 30-06 lipstick. I don't know what they call it, but this is just bowstring wax. I wax my strings continually, repeatedly wax my strings to maintain them and make sure they last a long time. This next set of tools over here is going to be used mainly for arrow building. Okay, so when we get to the arrow building section is when these are going to come in handy. I've got a little bit of 2-part epoxy. That's going to be used for putting in inserts, making sure they stay. I've got an arrow square, real easy. I made this one at work. Arrow squares come in really handy after you cut your arrows to make sure they're squared up. This right here is just a 22 caliber cleaning rod with a 22 caliber brush on the end of it, and that's for cleaning the inside of your arrow shaft. The other thing we have here is just isopropyl alcohol. This is 91%. I want it to evaporate really quickly. That's for cleaning the inside of the arrow shaft where you put your inserts in, and also for cleaning the outside of your arrow shaft for when you're putting your vanes on. The other thing is, right here is a tool that you don't really have to have, but it makes it really nice if you're going to use a quick set glue. This is for you screw your inserts on there, and then when you put your arrow, you just slide this down into your arrow, and it helps to get you a good, quick, convenient way of putting them in, especially if you're using a quick set glue. The other thing you're going to need is a fletching jig. This is just a Martin fletching jig, plastic, got a clamp with it. Those are, you know, if you're going to fletch your own arrows, you're going to have a fletching jig. I recommend these because they're pretty well built, and I've had these for several years, built thousands of arrows using my Martin jigs. I've got 6 of them total, and other than having to buy clamps for them occasionally, they have held up fantastic. So I recommend the Martin jigs, or BPE is another good one. So that's about it as far as what tools you're going to need to do your own bow work. Okay, so the first step that you're going to need to take getting your bow set up is to set it to the correct draw length and a draw weight. Now, I wish I could cover every one of these different types of modules out there, but there's just too many to cover. So, on draw length, what I'm going to discuss with you is how to determine your draw length, or at least get close, is to measure your wingspan. The wingspan is going to be your arms held straight out, tip of your fingers to the tip of your fingers, and you're going to divide that by 2.5. Now that's going to give you a rough estimate of what your draw length should be. So for me, when I measure mine out from tip of my finger to the tip of my finger, it gives me about, and divide it by 2.5, gives me about 28, and a little short of that. And I actually end up shooting 27.5 with the D-loop, and it ends up being really comfortable for me. Now the different modules for different bows, you've got different styles. You've got a draw specific cam, which is going to be exactly that. It's going to only work for that particular draw length versus, say, a 29-inch draw specific cam is a 29-inch cam, and that is it. A replaceable module like this Elite Synergy has a module that is specific to that draw length. Like for me, the module that's on here, which is the draw length that corresponds with 27.5. So that draw length module will only work for 27.5. On a replaceable module, you need to get the corresponding module from the company or from a shop to get that specific module or draw length that you need. A rotating module bow is going to have a module on it that you're going to be able to loosen up. You're going to be able to rotate it around to the corresponding draw length. So it's going to have a more range to it than a replaceable module draw length bow. And the way you determine this is just by the manufacturers. They'll all have charts on them saying, like if you go to Elite's website and you look up this Synergy, it's going to have a draw length module chart. Same way with a rotating module, it's going to have a chart that corresponds to it saying a number 7 is 27.5, 6 is 28, and so on and so on. So that's going to be how you're going to determine your draw length, is by using your wingspan. That's going to get you close, going to get you in the ballpark, and then by using the company's specific directions is how you're going to set your draw length. Now your draw weight is going to be subject to how strong you are. And of course, with your draw weight, it's going to change as you shoot a bow. That's one thing I've noticed. As you shoot, the more you shoot, the quicker you're going to be putting up more draw weight. And you're using muscles that you don't normally use. You're using back muscles that you don't normally use, and you're going to develop them pretty quickly. So to determine your draw weight is basically the best way to do it is to go to a shop and shoot a few bows until you find something that you're comfortable with. To determine your draw weight, you're going to need a scale, which we're going to show you here in just a second. I've got a scale mounted here, and basically I'm going to put my bow on here, and I'm going to pull this back, and it's going to tell me how what the draw poundage on this bow is. So this bow I already know is set at 70 pounds, but all I'm going to do is put that on there. I'm going to pull this thing down, and it's going to tell me that this is set at 70 pounds. If I want to loosen the draw weight on this, it's very important that you do this correctly. It's very easy to do, but it's very easy to mess up as well. You're going to use your Allen wrenches, and I like the longer ones because some of these bows can be pretty tough to turn. So I'm going to choose the corresponding Allen wrench, and what I like to do is set it someplace where I can remember the starting position of the Allen wrench, either in line with the limb or at a 90-degree angle to the limb. So to lower the draw weight, what you're going to do is you're going to turn this thing counterclockwise. Lefty-loosey is going to lower your draw weight. Righty-tighty or clockwise is going to raise your draw weight, but it's very important that you do it in this steps. If you're going to lower your draw weight, take one turn out or a half turn or how much ever you want to do it, but do it in an equal amount. We're going to take one full turn out of the bottom. Take that out of there. We're going to take one full turn out of the top. If you take one turn out of the bottom, you have to take one turn out of the top. Now you can take more turns at each time, but it's important that you do it in equal amounts. So if you do 2 out of the bottom, you do 2 out of the top. So we're going to do 1 turn out of the bottom. And according to the bow manufacturer, it's going to take, or depending on the bow manufacturer, it's going to take 2 to 4 pounds out each time that you do this. So that's going to be how you lower your draw weight. Remember, equal amounts of turns on each limb. So to raise your draw weight, you're going to do just the opposite. You're going to go clockwise. You're going to go an even number of turns. We're going to just go right down to 1 turn, which is going to bottom this bow right back out. So 1 turn on bottom, 1 turn on top. Now, another thing that's important with this is some of these bows, majority of them do not have stops. So if you loosen this bow up too much, you can actually take the limb off. The limb will actually come off and this bow could explode. So your manufacturer is going to have a recommendation of how many turns you can take this limb bolt out. Some of them it's 4, some of them it's 6, you know, so it depends on the manufacturer on how many turns you want to take on your limb bolt. This is a 60 to 70 pound bow, and that means on these limbs that I can take, this bow is maxed out at 70, and with the appropriate number of turns I can get it down to 60. You're not going to want to go beyond that. So if you're shooting a 55 pound draw weight and you've got a 60 to 70 pound bow, getting it down to 55 pounds is going to be hard and it's going to be dangerous. So that's how you change your draw weight on this bow, and it's very important that you do it properly and do it safely. Okay, so now you're ready to set up your rest and your D-loop. This is the first step in getting your accessories and everything mounted to your bow. For this step, you're going to need your bow square and you're going to need a marker. And this is why I suggest something besides a black marker, because you can see here the serving is black. So, as we discussed earlier, the definitions of the bow parts, this is your burger hole, and this is where your rest is going to mount up. So what we're going to do is we're going to install our bow square here, and the way we're going to determine where our rest and our D-loop is going to go is by using this bow square. We're going to line up the arrow with the burger hole. So we want our arrow pretty much even with the top and the bottom of the burger hole. When we have that done, I'll get my head out of the way. We have that lined up. What
what we're going to do is we're going to take our marker, and right above our knock on the square and right below the knock on the square, we're going to make a mark. That determines the location for our D-loop. So the next step we're going to take here is to tie our D-loop in. I have this bow laying this way for one simple reason, and that is because I'm more comfortable tying this knot in this with the bow in this position. So that's why I have it in this position. I have this bow on a bow vise, and I'm going to exaggerate this D-loop a little bit as far as tying the knot. I'm going to make everything big, so I'm going to try to show it to you the best way. Tying a D-loop can be kind of complicated at the beginning, but as more you do it, the more you're going to find it's pretty easy. What I like to do is to just simply start with, I like to use a bright colored D-loop. You can use whatever color you want to. This is just a BCY D-loop material. I buy this from 60X Custom Strings, and I buy it in 3-foot sections. I don't like the pre-cut links just because I'm not too nimble with my fingers, and I like to have plenty to work with. So I'm going to go on the back side of the string with the D-loop, and I'm going to wrap it around. Now with this wrapped around, I'm going to exaggerate this so there's plenty there. I'm going to come wrap back around the string on the right hand side, my right hand side of the D-loop material, and I'm going to wrap it around to the left side. So around the string, the right hand side, bring it around to the left side. Now I'm going to come back around to my side of the string, which is closest to me, go back under and back through the opening there. This is going to give me a basic slip knot, if you can see that. What this is going to do is basically give you a knot similar to this right here, where it tightens onto your string and will pull against itself. So that's the kind of knot that we're trying to tie. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tie this once like this before I do anything to show you guys how to do it. I'll go through this several times. So now I'm going to take my D-loop, I'm going to bring it to the side of the string that's closest to me, and I'm lining this up with the marks that I made with my marker and my bow square. So I'm going to bring it to my side, wrap it around, and I'm going to come through the opening. So I'm going to come on the left side of the D-loop material and bring it through. And then I'm going behind the D-loop material to the opposite side of the string, underneath, and back through again. And that is going to be my basic D-loop knot. So we're going to show you that again real quick. Maybe I can get my hands out of the way this time to show you the right way to do it. On the purple marks that we made before, I'm going to take my D-loop material, I'm going to go to the opposite side of my bowstring, I'm going to wrap it around, I'm going to go to my right of the D-loop material, wrap it around, bring it back toward myself, go under the bowstring, and back through the opening, which is right here. Now I'm going to pull this down nice and tight. I want to get as much of that excess out of there as I can, and we'll show you why in just a second. Now, with that knot in place, we're going to take the D-loop material to my side of the string, which is closest to me, and we're going to go around the D-loop material. We're going to go back through this opening right here with the tail end of the D-loop material. We're going to wrap around to the opposite side of the string, just like that. Wrap it around and bring it right through this loop, part of the loop, just like that. We're going to line these up with the purple sections, or the purple marks we made in the last section. that is it. That is how we tie our knot. And you'll notice that each knot, the loop, the tag end is going to be on opposite sides of the string. This tag end is closest to me, or coming toward me. This tag end is going away from me. That's going to create the kind of pull that you want on this. Each one's going to pull in an opposite direction as you attach your release and you draw this bow back. So the next step on this is going to be simply to cut it, and I use my needle nose pliers for this, and we're going to burn it. But what we want to do is get as much of that, we want to leave a small amount there to burn, but we want as much of it off there as possible. So using a lighter, we're going to burn our tag ends. Just get a nice melt on there, a nice mushroom. But keep far enough away from your string that you do not burn your string. It's a nice little mushroom. I always let it cool for just a second, and then just kind of force it down. Same way on the other side. Just like that. Now we're going to take our needle nose pliers. We're going to insert them in our D-loop. Make sure our knots are lined up with our purple marks, and we're just going to use this to do the initial spread on our D-loop. Now our D-loop pliers, this is where this is going to come in. You're going to insert your D-loop pliers, and you're just going to finish stretching that out. Now the length of your D-loop is going to be determined by the kind of release that you're using and just pretty much what's comfortable for you. If you're using an older style D-loop or an older style release, you may want a longer D-loop. So if it's got really big jaws, you got plenty of room to get in here behind your nock and get hooked up. If you're using something like I'm using, it's got a small head on it, you can go with a smaller D-loop. Now if you want to do that, like I said, we exaggerated this one quite a bit so you could see it, but if you want to do that, you can actually take this D-loop right here, if it's too long, and actually untie it. The way to do that is just to use your needle nose pliers and just kind of twist that knot right there until you force the burnt tag burned end out of there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to retie that basically the exact same way. I've already got it on my side of the string wrapped around and through this opening, and I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to pull all my slack out of there. This is going to give me a smaller D-loop, and it's going to get without wasting a bunch of material. So if you do get it too long, you don't like it, it's pretty easy to retie it and get it shorter without really using any more material. So same way, we're going to burn this tag end here. Just like that. And we're going to repeat the same steps we did before. We're going to use our needle nose pliers. Again, make sure everything's on the mark. Get our initial squeeze with our needle nose pliers. Insert our D-loop pliers. And you can see already this is quite a bit tighter. And we're going to give it a good stretch. And you can see I've reduced half of the length of that D-loop just by simply retying it. So now that we have our D-loop installed, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our rest. There are a lot of different rests out there on the market. Drop away rests, containment rests, just all different types. My preferred rest is the Medusa Max from Bowfinger Archery. Very simple drop away rest, very reliable. It's the one we're going to install today. Now the instructions at the end of this video, on the second half of this video, we're going to show you how to set up this rest as well as a containment rest. Containment rest is going to set up exactly like this. Basically anything that's not a drop away is going to set up exactly like this, minus doing the timing on the drop away arm. So we're going to do this one on this video because this is what I'm going to end up using on this bow, and it's a little bit more complex, so we want to make sure we cover everything. So the first thing you're going to do is open your rest and follow your manufacturer's suggestions on getting your rest set up. Every bow setup's going to be just a little bit different. Every rest is going to have its own unique features and unique design that's going to contribute to how it's set up. What I've done is I've got my bow in a bow vise and I've leveled it up, so I've got it pretty well level, up and down, vertical, and I'm going to install my rest. Now I'm going to install my rest right here in our burger holes with the hardware that came with the rest. It's going to come with a bolt that's going to match the threads on your bow. So we're just going to put that in there just like that. We're going to run that down to where it is fairly snug. I'm going to use our Allen wrenches, make it fairly snug, and at this point we're going to use our level and do the best we can as far as getting that fairly level with the bow. If you're off a little bit, it is not going to matter because of the type of rest they have, up and down elevation to them. There's going to be plenty of movement with this thing. So for now, what we've got is we've got it pretty well level, and it's nice on this Elite because we have the logo right here, so I can pretty much assume I can run the bottom of this parallel with the top of that sticker, and I can pretty much assume that my rest is level. If you want to, you can use your sight, or you can use your level here. You can put on top of it. You can level it up with the level of the bow, and you can make sure that that thing is absolutely perfect. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the elevation of our rest. If this is a containment rest, you're not going to have to worry about this, but if it is a drop away rest, you're going to want your arm in the up position. We're going to use our bow square. We're just going to install this right here on our D-loop. And that's going to pretty much bring it to where it is level with our burger holes. So this rest is actually just a tad high. So using the adjustment bolts on the opposite side of the rest, and it's going to be determined on the style of rest that you have. I know the Q8Es and some of the others have the adjustment bolt on this side of the rest. You're going to loosen this thing up and simply make your adjustments until you're level with your burger holes. You want this rest 100% level with this burger holes, maybe slightly lower. So that looks pretty good. We're going to tighten that thing up. Be sure to bring it into a full upright position and make sure. Now, if you're low, all you'd have to do is simply raise that thing up. But what you want is you want your arrow to be in line with the burger hole. Top and bottom should pretty much be in line. Some manufacturers are going to recommend maybe a 1/16 of an inch drop, but for the most part you're going to have it absolutely level. So now that we have that set, let's set our left and right. Okay, to determine your left and right, you're going to need to consult your owner's manual. It should have a number in there that's going to be the measurement from the inside of your riser to the center of your arrow. And if you get this off at this point, it isn't that big of a deal because we're going to tune this out later. All manufacturers are a little bit different too, so we're going to use our tape measure. We're going to measure from the shelf to the center of the arrow, and we're going to try to get 13/16 on this Elite. So I can see that this is a little bit close to the shelf out at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our Allen wrenches. We're going to loosen this bolt right here, and again, on the rest that you use, this may be just a little bit different. So we're going to loosen this up, and we're simply going to slide this rest out toward the outside of the bow just a little bit. Once we have that done, we're going to remeasure. You can see there we're just about right at this point. We're just about 13/16, maybe a tad over. But like I said, at this point it's not really that critical, because when we do our walkback tuning and our French tuning, at that point we're going to really set our center shot for this bow. The 13/16 is just a manufacturer's recommendation. It's an important place to start, but at the end, if you're not exactly at 13/16, that's pretty typical. Before we get into this next step, what I want to talk to you about is the bow press. I use a Last Chance Archery Easy Green bow press. This is what I recommend for the simple fact of I can press any style of bow with this, and I can do it very easily. It's very user friendly and very easy to set up. Follow the recommendations from not only Last Chance Archery but also from your bow manufacturer on how to press this bow. I'm not giving you any instructions on how to press this bow. I'm not telling you how to do it or in any way saying that this is the proper way to approach it, for the simple fact of I don't want to be liable for you if you don't follow the instructions from the manufacturer of not only your bow but your bow press. So with that said, I'm not going to show you how I'm pressing this bow, but I am going to show you the bow in the press, and I'm going to show you, and I'm using the Last Chance Easy Green. So our next step, we can actually kill two birds with one stone. If you have a containment rest instead of a drop away, you're actually done with it on that last step. If you're using a drop away rest, you need to determine your downward cable, and once we press this bow, we're going to put our string in our downward cable, and we're also going to install our peep sight while we've got this bow pressed. I like to press the bow as few times as possible. So we're going to take a little tension off of our bow here. And a simple way to tell which is your downward cable, one, you can look at your cam, but you could also just, once you take a little bit of tension off of your string, actually just give it a little bit of a tug. Give it a little bit of a tug, and you can see this cable is moving upward, and this cable here is moving in a downward direction. Now with this press, you don't want to give it too much of a tug. I'm just rocking those cams slightly, making sure that this one right here is the one that's going to move in the downward direction. So now that we have that determined, we're going to press it just a little bit more, enough to get a little bit of slack in our cable here. So following the manufacturer of the rest recommendation as far as location goes, we're going to use our downward cable here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and serve a stop in here. Some rests will come with a football clamp or something like that, some will not, but I'm going to assume that the rest that you're getting is not going to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to serve a small section right here, and that's going to actually serve as a stop so this cable can pull up against it and not slide any further. This may look complicated, but this is actually very, very easy to do. Using our BCY serving material, we're going to just pull off a small section. We're going to cut this. If you have a good pair of scissors, that helps. We're going to cut that. Now we're going to pull off another small section. So we've got two sections at the end, and we're going to use both of those. With one of our sections, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the point where the manufacturer suggests that we locate our, I'm going to take a little bit of tension back off here so we got a little bit of stiffness to it. I'm going to go down to where the manufacturer recommends that we install our our pull cable for our rest, and this manufacturer actually recommends down about the bottom of the cable, or the handle. So right here on our downward cable is where our pull cord for the rest is going to go. So before we're going to put that in there, just to make it easier, we're going to do our serving. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our loop and we're going to, or our serving material, and we're going to lay it right there alongside the downward cable, and just like that. We're going to leave a little tail end right here, and we're actually going to serve right over the top of that, and you're going to see this knot actually puts tension on itself. So we're going to do a couple servings right over the top of that, and we're going to pull it tight, make sure they're nice and grouped up, and then we're just going to continue on doing that. And I'm sorry that my fingers are in the way, but this is a knot that requires me to hold some tension on it, so I just really can't do it any other way. But you can see I've got my tail end there, and what I've done is I've laid it along there, and now I've just looped it back over, and I'm serving right over the top of it. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pull it really tight I'm going to do that for about 10 wraps, just like that, pulling each wrap really, really tight. You do not want this serving to go anywhere. And we're going to repeat this serving. This is basically the same kind of serving we're going to use on our peep sight here in just a little bit. Keeping each wrap nice and tight. So now that we have about 10 wraps on there, we're actually going to pull this tail end just like that, make a couple more wraps that we're not using the covering the tail end of it. About 3 or 4 wraps just like that, keeping good tension on it. Now this is where our second piece of string is going to come in handy. This is also where your hemostats may come in handy if you need them. If you've done something like I've just done and actually dropped your second piece, your hemostats will be handy to clamp on here and hold tension on that. But my hemostats are in my bag over there, so you're going to learn to do things the hard way if you're like me. So pulling that tight, make sure you got all your slack out of there. You're going to take your extra piece here that I just cut and you're going to make a loop out of it, just like that. You're going to lay your loop right here on top of the bowstring, the downward cable, and you're going to wrap, keep your other tail out of there, and you're going to wrap right over the top of this bowstring. Your first couple wraps are going to be pretty tentative. You want to keep everything in line. Pull that pretty tight. Next wrap the same way. Make sure everything's still in line. Now that you've got a couple wraps and you've got them tight, you can pretty much just start wrapping it again at this point. And again, you're going to do about 10 wraps on this, keeping this nice and tight, really pulling all the slack out of there that you can, keeping all the tension off of it or on it as possible. Going to do about 10 wraps on that till you get a nice long cover on there. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your tail end at this point. You got your tail end here. You're going to take your loop that you made earlier that you covered. You're going to put your tail end right through the loop, and you're going to grab a hold of that tail end and keep tension on it. Now with the other end of the piece that you looped, that you covered, you're going to pull back. Now this may be a little bit tough. If you've done it right, it will be a little tough. You're going to actually just start pulling your tail end back underneath all your other loops. So there you go. Now you have your serving done. You've got 2 tail ends there. You're going to want to cut these down a little bit closer. I like doing it like this and keeping a small amount of space in between, because when it's all said and done, these are both very close, and when I melt them, it makes it easier to melt and it turns it into a nice little area. You can see you can melt one. Careful not to get too into your string. Melt both of those right down, and now they're both together. And just like that, we have our serving done. So now that our serving is done, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit more tension out of our bowstring. We got it nice and loose. You can use your string separator, you can use your fingernails, you can use whatever you want to, but you're basically going to separate the 2 colors here right up next to the serving. Get all your brown on one side and all your green on one side. Make sure you got those nice and evenly separated. Okay, now that we've got those nice and evenly separated, we're going to take the cord from our rest, and we're actually just going to insert it through just like that, keeping it up close to our knot, and we're going to relieve the tension on our cable. And that's it. Our cable is set up and it's ready to time. Now I'm not going to show you at this point, but I'm also going to install my peep sight. We'll show you that later in its entirety. But while I have this pressed and I'm doing this, I'm also going to install my peep sight. Okay, to set the timing on your rest, you're going to need a draw board, or you're going to have to pull this thing back with your release. If you're going to do this with a release, the best thing to do is to have an arrow in it, just in case you do misfire it. What I've done is I've run out just a little bit here. I've got a little bit of slack in my rest, and what I'm going to do is, with the rest down in a downward position, I'm actually just going to pull this bow back on my scale and see what it does as far as pulling this thing into the upright position. Just going to see if we've got a starting point and kind of see where we're at. And I can see that with that, I started to pull the rest up immediately, so I need to add some slack into my rest. So we're going to go try it again. See, I'm not at full draw there, and it went ahead and pulled it back too early. So again, I need to add some slack. If you're doing this and the rest is not moving, then you need to take some slack out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it back again. Starting to move there, and it's coming to full draw just a little early still, so we're going to add, and we're just adding smaller and smaller amounts to this each time until we feel like we're getting close to where it needs to be. It's right there at the point where it needs to break over, so again, I'm adding just small amounts to this. Patience is the key. There we go. I'm pretty confident that that is where I want it, so I'm going to let the bow up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a knot in the back side of this, which we'll show you here in just a second. I'm going to tie just a slip knot that I can slip right up against, or a square knot that I can slip right up against the string. So in this position, it won't move. I'm going to pull it really nice and tight. Again, I'm going to draw the bow back. Pops up nice in the position that it should be in at full draw. I'm going to let the bow down, and with this bow actually with the rest actually cocked, I'm going to pull it again and make sure I'm going to make sure it operates at full draw as well as in the upright position as it does in the downward position. So everything looks good, and that's basically how you time your rest. So that's the basics of how you time your rest. Basically, once you start pulling this thing back and it starts to come up, if you're pulling it back and at full draw it's only coming up like that, it means you, in a very small amount, not coming to full draw, it means you have too much slack in your cable, and it means you need to take a little bit of the slack away. So if you're pulling it back and it immediately starts to pull up, it means that you have this thing too tight. So you have to add some slack down here. Once you get it to the appropriate position, all you're going to do is tie a knot in there with the serving that we did before, and that knot, it's not going to allow it to move upward on your cable, and it's not going to allow any slack to get into your cable here. Another way you can set this, like with this Medusa Max, is you have a fine-tune adjustment right here. So if you get it really, really close, but your knot moves just a little bit, you can actually take this fine-tune adjustment here, and if you need to tighten it up, you can actually loosen this bolt, pull a little bit down to take a little bit of slack out, or you can loosen this bolt up and take a little bit out of this end to add some slack into it. So a lot of these rests, especially like this Medusa Max, does have some fine-tune adjustment here as well. Okay, so to find the location of my peep sight, the best thing to do is to have a little bit of assistance. So Lindsay's going to help me. She's got a marker in her hand. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull this bow back. I'm going to come to my anchoring position where I'm comfortable, and Lindsay's going to make a mark that's just about even with my eye. That's going to give me a rough estimate of where to start in placement with my peep sight.
So again, we're going to have an arrow on the bow. We're going to point it in a safe direction. I'm going to come to full draw. I'm going to get to my anchoring position. Once I'm there, Lindsay's going to make a mark. Now I'm going to let down. And that mark is where I'm going to install my peep sight initially. Now that isn't where it's going to end up being, I can tell you that right from the get-go. But that saves me from putting it all the way down here, all the way up here, and then having to make a 4 or 5 inch adjustment. I've got it probably within, that mark's probably within an inch or maybe even less. So that is my starting position for my peep sight.
So now that you have your peep sight marked and you've pulled this bow back, you know that it's going to be in the correct position, or you know that you're going to be pretty close to the correct position. You can go ahead and press this bow, get a little bit of slack off of your string, and you can go ahead and install your peep sight. The peep sight we're using today is just a 3/16 diameter peep sight, and the size of the peep sight you're going to use is going to be determined by your sight housing, which we're going to discuss later when we talk about sighting in. I generally use a 3/16 or a 1/4 inch peep. So what we're going to do is, with slack in our string, we're going to separate our string out. Again, all brown on one side, all green on one side. We're at my mark that we made with the help of our assistant, and we're actually just going to install our peep sight in there. You can see this peep sight has an angle to it. I'm going to make sure that peep sight is angled toward us, away from it, or with the angle, it's going to be actually with the opening angled toward our eye whenever we shoot. So I'm going to put a little bit of tension on the string here. I'm going to go ahead and let this bow down. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go out and we're going to pull the bow back several times and make sure that this peep sight is in the right location.
Okay, so when you're setting the elevation on your peep sight, what you're going to do is you're going to draw this thing back with your eyes closed. Always put an arrow on it, point it in a safe direction. You're going to pull this thing back with your eyes closed, and you're going to open up your eyes. Now you may need a little bit of assistance because you can see this peep sight may not quite turn. As we serve it in and get everything set up, then we'll worry about getting it turned, getting our D-loop tuned. But what we need right now is we just need to set the elevation. So you may need a little bit of assistance for this. So we're going to go ahead and pull this thing back with my eyes closed. I'm going to come to my anchoring position, and Lindsay's going to help me. She's going to rotate the string around to where I can see through the peep, and then from there we'll adjust our elevation until we get it right. So I'm going to pull back, my eyes closed. I'm going to come to my anchoring position. Now Lindsay's going to rotate the peep around, and it is too low. So I'm going to let the bow down once she gets her fingers out of the way. And I'm going to move the peep sight up just a little bit. Now I'm going to pull it back again with my eyes closed, get to my anchoring position, and Lindsay's going to rotate this around again and make sure it is in the correct position. So eyes closed, full draw, get to my anchoring position, and that's perfect. Now this peep sight's ready to be served in.
Now that we have our peep sight in the correct spot and we are sure that it's where we're gonna want it, we're gonna go ahead and press the bow again. We're gonna put a little bit of slack in there. Again, we're gonna need 2 pieces of our serving, 1 piece with the loop on it, which we're gonna put right down here, and then another piece. We're gonna do the same knot we did earlier when we were installing our rest. So we're going to need a pretty good piece. I like to use a really long piece on this. This serving, while it's not cheap, it does last for quite a while, even in a bow shop type scenario. So we're going to do the exact same knot we did before. We're going to lay this piece of the serving right down here, and we're just going to actually serve right over the top of it. And again, I apologize for not showing this as well as I could at this point, because I need to have my fingers in the way to do this knot properly. So we're just going to go right over that tail end, and first few times, like I said, it is pretty tentative the first few times, but after that, once everything's going to stay in place, we're going to serve it up pretty tight. We're going to pull pretty tight on this thing, and don't worry, it's going to pull. I like to serve toward me, but there are times when I will serve away from me as well if I need the string to rotate that way to get a proper peep alignment. That is one thing you can do when you're serving in your peep sight, is you can use your serving to actually make sure you're getting proper rotation of your peep sight. By serving one direction or another, you can actually make your peep rotate one way or another. So we're going to serve that right on down to within about a ½ inch of our peep sight. Now we're going to take our peep sight or our thread, our serving material, and we're going to go right here on the peep sight. We're going to wrap it right around the side closest to me at this point, and we're just going to actually take our tail end and insert it right here, and we're just going to pull that tight. We're going to do that 3 or 4 times right around. It's going to give us a nice good knot. It's going to make it look good, and it's going to be able to, it's going to hold. It's going to be a good sturdy knot as well. A lot of guys tie what they call a super knot, which I am really not a big fan of. It slides around too much, and it is really a pain if you have to try to cut it out, because there's so many knots there. It ends up being a lot more trouble than it's worth when you're cutting it. So now that we've got this served, I've got 2 wraps there, and I'm down to where I'm about even with my peep sight. I'm actually just going to serve this, wrap this right around my peep sight, the groove in the peep sight that goes all the way around it. I'm just going to serve this around that one time and pull it nice and tight. Now I'm going to bring it over to the opposite side, the green side of this string, and I'm actually just going to serve it right through here and wrap it around the green side a couple of times, just like I did on the brown side. So again, keep that nice and tight. Just wrap it around there just a couple of times, and then we're going to start our knot, our wrap again, wrapping both sides of the string. So we got 2 wraps. Going to go ahead and give it one more, a third good wrap, and then we're going to start wrapping the same direction back toward me. And this is why I want a long piece of this, because it does take quite a bit. So now I'm just going to continue wrapping around both the brown and the green, closing that gap up right there and making my knot. So I'm going to give it 2 or 3 good wraps here. Take a little bit of this tension back out of there. Make it a little bit tighter as we're pulling it. So I got about 4 or 5 wraps on there now, and we're going to do just like we did down here for our serving. We're going to take our extra piece here, and we're going to lay it right there along the string and give a couple tentative wraps. Make sure everything stays in line. Get a couple real careful wraps just like that. Now that everything's going to be in line, pull all our slack out and just continue to wrap down till we have about 8 to 10 wraps covering the loop end of our extra piece. And now that we've got that done, we're going to take our loop, we're going to open it up, we're going to insert our tail right there through the loop, keeping tension on the knot itself with my thumb, and we're just going to actually grab hold of the tail end and grab hold of the loop and pull this right back through, pulling our tail end right under the wraps that we made earlier. Just like that. So now we've got 2 tail ends here. I'm going to take our scissors, just cut those down pretty close. Take our lighter and give those a nice little burn. Again, being careful to stay away from your string. Just like that. Now that we have our peep installed and served in, we're going to relax our bowstring. And what we want is our peep sight when it's at the proper elevation, to pretty much be in line with our D-loop. You can see this sets at that kind of angle, so does our D-loop. They're pretty much in the same line. So if our peep sight was at this angle, our D-loop would need to be in the same line as well. If that's not the case, the easiest way to fix it, if that's not the case, the problem's going to be is if your D-loop is coming off on this side and your peep sight's coming off on this side, when you pull this back, your peep sight's not going to align. You can see when I pull this over in line, my peep sight rotates and stays in line with my loop. So we need the loop in order to get our peep sight set, in order to get some things done. But unfortunately, you may have to cut this off, and you may have to retie your peeps or your D-loop. And what you want to do is, if it is, say this D-loop was at this angle and your peep sight was over here, you're going to want to cut this off, retie one in the exact same spot, but make it match the angle of your peep sight. That way you get the correct peep rotation every time. Now that we've got this thing all set up, our rest is timed, our D-loop is on, our peep sight is set, we're ready to start installing our other accessories.
Okay, before we do any tuning, we're going to sight our bow in. The first thing we're going to do is I'm actually going to sight this thing in from 10 yards. And at 10 yards, I'm not really going to fine tune or anything like that. Basically just going to make sure I can hit the target. It's nice, it's close, it's pretty easy to at least hit the target from there. So at 10 yards, I'm going to get it sighted in rough. At 20 yards, I'm going to then back up to 20 yards, and my top pin is going to be my 20-yard pin. And I'm going to fine tune it from there. The rule of thumb for sighting your bow in is to follow your arrow. And what I mean by that is, if you're shooting right, you want to follow your arrow with your sight and move your sight to the right. And this is all going to be with the orientation of the string close to you, the handle further away from you. So you're going to move your bow sight to the right. If you're shooting to the left, you're going to move your bow sight to the left. If you're shooting high, you're going to move your bow sight up. If you're shooting low, you're going to move your bow sight down. If you have a combination, what I suggest is getting one of the two fixed first. So that's what we're going to do first, is get our bow sighted in. All the other tuning steps we take after that, we need the bow sighted in for that, to get this bow tuned out. So, and one other key note about your sights, if you're using a multiple pin sight, it goes in descending order. So you're going to start usually in 10-yard increments like we discussed, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. So the further down the sight is, the farther range it is. And if you look at this, what that does is it actually makes you raise, if you have your 20-yard pin here and you raise your bow to the 40-yard pin, it actually raises all those pins up, raises the trajectory of your bow up. So your further pins in down the order are going to be your farther distances. So we're going to step out here now at 10 yards. We've selected the proper arrow. We've got this bow ready to shoot, all set up and ready to go. So we're going to step out here at 10 yards and make sure we've got this thing close. Then we're going to step to 20 and we're going to do our fine tune adjustment there. This is a right impact, so we're going to move our sight to the right. This is a left impact, we're going to move our sight to the left. This is a high impact. We're going to move our sight up. This is a low impact. We're going to move our sight down. This is a combination impact. Our sight is both off to the right and high. I'm going to fix one at a time. I'm going to fix my elevation first, then I'm going to fix my left and right.
After multiple attempts and adjustments to my sight, I finally got a bullseye, which is the desired effect from our sighting in process. Okay, for this example, I've taken the cipher off and I've actually put on the Trophy Ridge clutch. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to set my second and third axis. And setting your second and third axis is basically your second axis is this way and your third axis is this way. So we're getting everything leveled up with the bow. So you're going to need a few things for this. And one of the things you're going to notice, second axis is really going to be noticeable, because if you pull back and really feel like you're got your bow level and your bubble inside here is off, then you may need to adjust your second axis. Third axis just really makes everything come in line, and a lot of times I don't mess with the third axis, but this site has it, so we're going to go ahead and do it. And a lot of sites do not have second and third axis adjustment. This clutch does, which is the reason why I put it on here. So what you're going to need for this is a bow vise, which I've got my bow in right now, and it's basically holding my bow, and you're going to need a level. So what I'm going to do to adjust my second axis is I'm going to put this level right here on the side, and I'm going to adjust this bow until it's level. Now with it level, I'm going to look at my bubble in here, and if my bubble is not perfectly level, I'm going to find the appropriate screws or bolts, and I'm going to take my Allen wrenches and I'm going to loosen up those bolts. And always check this again, check this multiple times, and I'm actually going to make the adjustment to get that level set. So now that I have my level in there is perfect, I'm going to check the level on the side of my bow again, and it is off. From me adjusting that, I've messed up the level on my bow. So I went just a little too far. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this thing back up. And with that level, I'm going to level this and tighten her down. Really helps to have a good quality bow vise when you're doing this. Mine is not the greatest, but it will work. So I got level there, level there. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down. My second axis is adjusted. Now my third axis is going to be pretty much the same thing, except I'm going to have to use the level on my sight, which you can see there. I'm going to level my bow, which finding a good spot on your bow to level it is usually the best thing to do, is to put your level on your string somewhere where you don't have any interference with anything like I do here. So we're going to go ahead and get our bow leveled. Now that our bow is level, I'm going to put this, you can put it on the inside of your sight, you can put it on the outside of your sight. I can see my sight is leaning just a little bit, so I'm going to loosen this bolt right here and the one on the bottom. Make my adjustment. And tighten everything back up. You can see the third axis is a little bit easier than the second axis is to get everything lined up. So right there, that's pretty dang close to being level. Check the string again. Pretty good. So that is all there is. All that you need to do to set your second and third axis. Now, like I said, not every site's going to have these, which is why I installed this clutch, is to show you guys how to set your second and third axis using this. Now that we've got our bow sighted in, we're going to start our tuning process. The first step in our tuning process is to paper tune. Paper tuning is going to show us a couple different things. It's just going to show us our rest setup, whether it's correct or not, and it's also going to show us whether our arrow spine is correct. You can build yourself a paper tuning rack out of PVC pipe, which is pretty simple to do. All you need to build is a stand with a square. For about the same price, or probably cheaper, you can get this, which is a paper tune it from 30-06 outdoors. And the reason I like this is, one, it's cheap. It's about 12 bucks, so that's not too high at all. The other thing about it is you got multiple shots here and multiple places to shoot, and you can tell right here, it tells you what each one of the tears is going to indicate, and it tells you how to fix them. So you got tail left, move arrow rest to the right to correct. Tail right, move arrow rest to the left to correct. Lower tail high, lower string knocking point, or raise arrow rest. Tail low, raise string knocking point, or lower arrow rest. Multiple issues. Always fix vertical tear first, then fix the horizontal tear. This will get you a pretty dang close to being tuned. Paper tuning is my initial step in tuning. From then I paper tune, and then I do a modified French tune, which we're going to show you, and then I broadhead tune. We're also going to show you walkback tuning, because walkback tuning is effective as well. But paper tuning is my initial setup, and you're going to find the flashcards that come with this, and they're going to show you how to paper tune this bow. But we're going to go ahead and shoot a few through here. We're not going to run through everything because you got the flashcards to consult, but we're going to go ahead and paper tune this Elite Synergy while we got it. And what I recommend, I definitely recommend this paper tune it, and this is from 30-06 Outdoors. We're going to do this from about 3 to 5 feet. I prefer to do it from about 5 feet, and what you want to do is take multiple shots. You're going to shoot 1, 2, 3, make your adjustment, and shoot again. So it's a very easy thing to do, and it's also a very effective way to get your initial tuning job set up. Okay, so we have our paper tune it set up. We got our hips target in the background, and make sure you have plenty of room between your paper tuner and your target for the arrow to clear the paper tuner. So we're going to take some shots here, and we're going to see if our bow, our Elite Synergy, is in tune. Okay, you can see on the impact, you can see right here the 2 marks from my vanes. You can see where my field point went through here. So you can see what I've got is a tail left. So it means I need to move my arrow rest to the right to correct this problem. Now before I do that, I'm going to take multiple shots. Again, shot number 2, I've got my tail to the left, so I'm going to go ahead and move my sight my rest to the right. Okay, when you're doing this, it's best to go in small increments and take multiple shots. So what I've done is I've moved my rest to the right, and I've only moved it about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to move over to my second yellow circle here and shoot into it. As you can see now, my impact is much closer. My tail is still to the left, but it's very, very close to being a bullet hole. I'm going to take one more shot and make sure that that's correct, and then I'm going to move my rest again. As the instructions say, move arrow rest to the right to correct. And I impacted into the same hole, so I'm going to go ahead and pull my arrows, and I'm going to shoot into a fresh spot. I'm going to go ahead and shoot just a little bit to the left of that spot. I have not made any adjustments to my rest yet, since I shot into the same hole. I want to shoot again into a fresh piece of paper, or a fresh spot on the paper, just to make sure that I've still got that left-hand tear before I make any adjustment. Now you can see there, I've got pretty much a bullet hole without making any adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot it one more time to make sure I've got a bullet hole. Your form and your technique can make a little bit of a false reading on paper tuning, which is why paper tuning is not my end-all be-all for tuning. Because I got a false reading here, now I've got a bullet hole, I gotta verify that I do have the bullet hole and that this is a false reading. But if you have bad form, you're gripping a bow, you're doing something like that, you can get false readings. You may think your bow's tuned, but it may not be. As you can see on that one, I got the tail left tear. So what ended up being the false reading was my bullet hole. So I'm going to go ahead and make a slight adjustment to my rest and move it just a little bit to the right. The point of impact was right here above that one. You can see I've almost got a perfect bullet hole in that now. I'm going to choose another spot over here and aim for that spot again this time. Here's our last tear, which we got a little bit close to the tear here, but you can see it tore a little bit that way, but I can see my vein tear up here, vein tear down here, and then the vein tore across. But we have a perfect bullet hole. So this bow is now paper tuned. Our next step is going to be walk back tuning. The second step in our process is walk back tuning. What walk back tuning is going to do is make sure your pins are accurate at further distances by making sure your rest is centered. The manufacturer's suggestion, which on this Elite Synergy is 13/16, is just that. It's just a suggestion. So 13/16 is a great place to start, but it's not an exact spot. There can be slight adjustments depending on the bow, and I've seen it change from bow to bow of the exact same model. So my Synergy may end up being perfect at 13/16. Your Synergy may end up being needing some tuning when you set it at 13/16. So the initial step we're going to take is walk back tuning. Now the next step we're going to take is modified French tuning. You're going to see these are both going to accomplish the same thing. If you sight your bow in at 20 yards and you're hitting left and right, it's hitting perfect. You move back to 30 and you're off to the right. Well, what this means is it's not your sights, it's actually your rest, and this is why you're going to walk back tune. So we're going to put in some graphics here, and we're also going to include this in the cards. The cards are going to show you exactly how to walk back tune, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to go ahead and walk back tune this Synergy and show you what I have to do to get it walk back tuned. So what you're going to do is you're only going to use your 20-yard pin to do this. So you're going to shoot at 20, 25, and 30 yards, and you're only going to use your 20-yard pin. Assume that your bow is sighted in. You've paper tuned your bow, so you ought to be pretty close. And at 20 yards, you're going to aim for the bullseye. And theoretically, you're going to hit dead center of the bullseye. At 25 yards, you're going to aim for the bullseye, again using your 20-yard pin. And you're going to impact a little bit lower, but in a perfect world, a perfect setup, you're going to impact directly below your first shot. So you're going to have the bullseye shot and you're going to have the direct impact below it at 25 yards. At 30 yards, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to shoot at the bullseye, try to split that first arrow in half, and you're going to use your 20-yard pin. And of course, it's going to shoot low. And it should fall in line with your other 2 arrows. So when it's all said and done, you should have 3 arrows that are precisely in line. And you're going to get a little bit of variance in this, because if you're like me, I'm not going to shoot a perfect line every time. It ain't going to happen. I'm going to be off just a little bit one way or another. But if I feel like I've executed 3 good shots and they're reasonably close to the center or reasonably close to falling in line, you know, if they're a couple inches out to the right, a couple inches out to the left, then I'm okay with that. I may make some minor adjustments, but I know me and I know my shooting ability, and at 30 yards, if I'm an inch to the right, it's probably me, it's probably not the bow. So you have to take that into consideration when you're doing this. And when we modified French tune it, you're really gonna find that's gonna be done very close, and it's gonna take a lot of the guesswork out of this. So walk back tuning, like I said, it's gonna get you rough in. But okay, so what's going to happen in the real world is that's probably not going to happen on your initial 3 shots. What's probably going to happen is you're going to have a bullseye at 20 yards, and at 25 yards you're going to
have an impact either to the left or to the right. This is a very easy thing to do. What you're going to do is, in this case, unlike sighting in where you follow your arrow, you're going to go away from your arrow, and you're going to go in very, very small increments, and you're going to do it with your rest. So at 20 yards you get a perfect bullseye. At 25 yards you impact to the right. At 30 yards you impact even further to the right. So you're going to go away from your arrow, and you're going to move your rest to the left in small increments until you get that nice line. Now the other way is just the opposite. You get your bullseye at 20 yards, you get your left impact at 25, left impact at 30, you're going to move your rest to the right. And again, very small increments you're going to want until you get those arrows to fall in line. Once you walk back tuning and you get a good line with your arrows, next thing we're going to do is we're going to modify French tune this bow, and that's going to be doing the same thing. But when we modified French tune, we're going to be doing just such small increments. We're really going to be doing precise movements and really trying to get this thing exactly dialed in. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my synergy, step back here at 20 yards, 25 and 30, and just go ahead and walk back tune this thing and show you where I'm at on this. And I'm going to be using a hips target. One of the reasons I use a hips target is because it has a tuning cross built into it. It has a section on the side, I'm looking at the target now, where it's got a line down and then a line across. So I've got and in the center I've got a dot that I can aim at. So I'm using hips target, one, because they're very good targets and they're very durable, and they have, not only they have the tuning cross built in, they also have a selection guide built in, which we'll show you. We're going to do a review on it. Sound like a salesman now, but that's why I'm using the hips targets, because it has this tuning guide built in. If you don't have a hips target, go buy you one. No, I'm just kidding. If you don't have a hips target, an easy way to do this is to take plumber's tape or any kind of tape. I don't mean plumber's tape, I mean blue tape, like painter's tape, that'll come off easy, and just make you a line going straight down the center of your target, and you'll know how well your arrows are falling in line. So we're also going to use that for our modified French tuning as well. It's going to be very important for our modified French tuning. So we're going to go ahead and get our hips target set up here and get our synergy all walk back tuned. So you can see there my arrows are falling in a right pattern. We have our initial impact, we have our second, and we have our third, which are all to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my rest away from my arrows. I'm actually going to move my rest to the left until I got a nice line. This also shows you why we do not stop at paper tuning, because the paper tuning adjustments I made were actually to the right. And to be honest, most of the time nowadays I don't even paper tune. So this is the initial step that I do to tune it, because you can see I'm actually tuning out now what I did when I paper tuned, which was when I paper tuned I moved my rest to the right. So now I'm going to move my rest back to the left a little bit until we got us a nice line. You can see now I have a left impact. Have our 20 yard, 25 and 30 yard. What I've done is I've actually moved my rest a little bit too far to the left, so we're going to try to bring it back to center now. You can see now we have pretty close to being a straight down impact. I got just the edge of the tuning mark there. We're off just a little bit to the left still. Going to make one small minute adjustment to it, but that's going to be the end of my walk back tuning. What I'm going to go ahead and do is the modified French tuning. Now that you're done walk back tuning, you're ready to French tune your bow. Some people call it French tuning, some people call it modified French tuning. Either way, it's French tuning your bow. And what French tuning your bow is going to be doing is pretty much exactly like modified, or pretty much like walkback tuning. You're really working on getting your rest centered up exactly and get your arrow shooting as well as possible. So the little difference here is instead of being at 20, 25, and 30 yards, you're going to be really, really close. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our target, and we're going to shoot at 9 feet, and we're going to shoot at 9 yards, or 3 yards and 3 feet, or 9 yards. Anyway, 9 feet and 9 yards is what we're gonna shoot at. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put a string on my target, or if you're like me, I've got this hips target set up, and it's already actually got a cross in it, and then the cross, in the middle of the cross, it has lettering. So I'm gonna be shooting at the lettering. And if you don't have a target like that, you can take a string. You want something fairly thin because this is really, really precise adjustments to your rest. So we're going to set back, we're going to put our string on there, or we're really going to use a hips target with the tuning cross on it. And what we're going to do is move back to 9 feet. And at 9 feet, we're going to aim for the dead center of that string and try to bust that string, or bust that tuning cross. And from 9 feet, if we don't hit that tuning cross, what we're going to do is we're going to move our sight until we hit that tuning cross. And again, with your move your sight, you do it just like you're sighting in, and you actually move your sight toward the arrow. So at 9 feet, when we miss the line, we're going to move our sight until we hit our line. Once we've got our line hit with our sight, what we're going to do is move back to 9 yards. And at 9 yards, again, we're going to aim for that line. And what we're going to do this time is, if we're off, we're going to adjust our rest. And what this is going to do, and on the rest, you're going to go away from your arrow. So it's just like walkback tuning in that aspect. If you hit to the right, move to the left. If you hit to the left, move to the right. What this is going to do is it's going to bring your sight, and it's going to bring your rest perfectly in line, and it's going to get everything lined up and centered with that bow, and it's really going to fine tune your center shot. And French tuning is my preferred method of tuning. It's really a more fine-tuned method of getting everything set up like you did on your walkback tuning. Walkback tuning roughs it in, and French tuning really fine-tunes it. So what we're going to do is we're going to get synergy out and take it back here, and we're going to go ahead and walkback tune, or actually, I'm sorry, we're going to go ahead and French tune this bow. Okay, so our first shot's going to be from 9 feet or 3 yards, and on this one, if we don't hit that center line, what we're going to do is make adjustments to our sight. So you can see here we shot just a little to the left of the line. So I'm going to shoot this multiple times to make sure that that's correct. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my sight just a little bit to the left until I get that thing hitting right here on my line in the middle of our tuning cross. You can see there I still hitting to the left, hit almost exactly the same spot. So I'm going to make just a little bit more of an adjustment to my sight. I'm going to move it to the left until I can hit that line right there in the center. And there we go, that's what we want. So from 9 feet, I've got it where I'm hitting pretty much in the center of my writing here on this tuning cross. So that's pretty much what we're going to leave our sight at. Now I'm going to shoot this again a couple more times just to make sure that that's exactly where I want it. But I'm going to go ahead, and after I get that, ensure that that is where it needs to be, I'm going to go ahead and move back to 9 yards. And from 9 yards, I'm going to make adjustments to my rest. Okay, so you can see there from 9 yards I'm hitting a little bit to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my rest to the left. Okay, so there we go. I've hit pretty much in the center of my line. Again, I'm going to shoot it multiple times to make sure that that's where it needs to be. But I feel pretty good that my sight and my rest are now in alignment, and my bow is actually French tuned. Now keep in mind when you're doing this to move your rest and move your sights in very, very small increments. This is your fine-tuning process for getting your rest and getting your sight all lined up. Our last step in the tuning process is broadhead tuning. Even if you're using an expandable head or simply 3D shooting, I suggest you broadhead tune. this gets your really fine adjustment done. What we've done so far with walkback tuning and with French tuning is simply get our rest absolutely perfectly centered. With broadhead tuning, this is going to actually just make sure our arrow is pointed directly straight. With a field point, if the arrow is not pointed straight at the target, you can adjust your sights and you can make it fly to the target. When you put on a big old broadhead, it's gonna, if your arrow rest is pointing to the left, it's gonna fly to the left. If your arrow rest is pointing to the right, it's gonna fly to the right. So with this kind of tuning, what you're doing is absolutely getting that thing centered up, and your arrow from nock to tip is going to be 100% straight. And one of the reasons why I suggest to do this, and I do it to even my 3D bows, is simply for the fact that it makes you more efficient. And one of the reasons why I shoot, even if I'm shooting an expandable head, I shoot a big broadhead, because if I can tune this broadhead and get this broadhead to fly straight, then an expandable broadhead is going to be butter. It's going to be simple, it's going to be smooth, absolutely no problem. So the advantage to it is it gives you that much more efficiency, makes your arrow fly that much straighter, and gives you that much more momentum and kinetic energy when you hit your target or you hit an animal. So I'm using a 100 grain dirt nap broadhead. This is a cut on contact head, and this is what I tune all of my bows with, because if I can get this to tune, I can get anything to fly and tune out. What we're going to do with this, again, we're adjusting with our rest, and the fix on this is just pretty much like it is when you're walkback tuning. We're going to adjust our rest, and we're going to move our rest away from the point of impact. So if we shoot this thing and we actually get a right impact, we're going to move our rest to the left. If we get a left impact, we're going to move our rest to the right. Now there is a rule with this kind of tuning. If I can get this within a couple of inches of the same point of impact as my field point, then that, and it won't get no better than that, then that's about as good as you're going to get. Sometimes this is not perfect. Now if you're going to 3D shoot and you get this within a couple inches of your field point, and your field point is hitting dead on, hitting accurate, then you leave your sight alone. If you're going to end up hunting and you're going to be shooting the broadhead, what you may have to do is move your sight just a little bit over to the broadhead. So the last thing we want to do is move our sight. Just simply going out, putting on a broadhead and moving the sight is not the right thing to do whenever you're getting your bow set up for hunting. So, but if we get this within a couple inches and we can't get it any closer to getting the same point of impact as our field point, then what we're going to do is simply move our sight over to the direction of the arrow. We're going to follow our arrow and get our broadhead to where it's hitting exactly where we're putting that pin. So we're going to step back here, and I'm going to do this at 20 yards, and we're going to see what kind of impact we're going to get with this broadhead. And once again, I'm going to tune out this synergy and see what we get, but there are flashcards here that are going to be included in the PDF file that are going to show you what to do in any scenario that you may run into. Okay, so you can see there we're hitting just a little to the left, about 2 inches. So I'm going to make a very small adjustment to my rest. I'm going to move it to the right, maybe a 32nd of an inch, and that's going to be just about all the movement I'm going to make. So now we've impacted to the right and low, which the low was probably me. The right impact, I'm going to move my rest to the left. Again, I'm going to move it maybe a 64th of an inch, just a very little bit. Okay, so you can tell here I'm shooting all around it. I'm shooting both left and right of it. I've put about 10 shots into this thing, and that is a really small target for me to shoot. You can see that's not much bigger. That's a marker, so it's a pretty small target. The thing's about the size of a quarter, and from 20 yards, that's just a really small target for me. But you can see most of my impacts. I got one here, several right down here, several here. I can move my rest up or down just a little bit and adjust my elevation. With that, again, you're going to want to go away from your arrow. So I'm getting a low impact. So what I'm going to want to do is move my rest up just a very, very small amount, maybe a 32nd of an inch, to bring that up here. My left and right is, I'm going to consider it pretty good because, like I said, I was hitting all over that. So I'm going to adjust my elevation, and I'm going to call that good because that is, for me, shooting at something the size of a quarter at 20 yards with a broadhead this size, I consider good, and I consider that being a broadhead tuned bow. So that's it. This Elite Synergy is now broadhead tuned, and that's the final step in my tuning process. I've shot this bow 30, 40, 50 yards with lighted nocks on, and the arrows are flying straight. I can shoot everything from a field point to this big broadhead out of this thing, and they all fly and hit pretty much the same point of impact. So this bow is ready to shoot, and it's ready to go either hunt, shoot 3D, shoot spots, shoot whatever I want to shoot with it. And everything that I shot in this video, of course, the people who were presented at the first on this as sponsors, it's the gear that I use. This is not something that you're never going to see me use again. You'll go out and buy the things that you feel are appropriate and the items that you like. But if you watch my other bow reviews, watch my hunting videos, you're going to see me using this sight, or a React sight, which I prefer the React. So you're going to see me using a Trophy Ridge sight. You're going to see me using a bow finger rest. You're going to see me using the bow finger stabilizers. Same way with the other gear. You're going to see me using hips stabilizers and hips targets. You're going to see me using all of this gear, and that's why I recommend it, is because this is the stuff that has been field tested by me. This is stuff that I've used for the last several years, and it's stuff that I've come to rely on, and stuff that I know worked for me. So when it comes to it, you make the decisions on the products that you put on your bow based on what you want to do, or based on what you like and what you don't like. The stuff that I use in this video is simply the stuff that I have used for the past several years, and it's the stuff that I'm personally endorsed and the stuff that I personally recommend. So I appreciate you guys watching this video. I hope it helped out. I hope it helped make you a better bow technician and help you to do your own work. Appreciate you guys watching this. Appreciate any feedback that you guys got for me, and appreciate it if you guys would check out my website, which is ikesoutdoors.com, and check out our YouTube channel as well for more tips, how-to videos, and there are a few hunting videos on there as well. So like I always say, I appreciate you guys watching this. Until next time, thank you very much. Welcome to the second half of our video. In this section, we're going to cover multiple different things, but this is basically, I'm going to break down the different kinds of products, such as releases, stabilizers, rests, sights, and then I'm also going to show you how to fletch an arrow. There's a lot of hunt stuff out there on the market, and this section basically is to help you get a little bit more of an informed decision when you're purchasing these products. First thing I'm going to talk about is releases. There are going to be 3 different types of releases, and the number one release that you're going to see is a wrist strap release. Now there's going to be a lot of different configurations of this. You're going to see Velcro straps, you're going to see buckles, which I prefer. You're going to see ones with jaws that open and close. You're going to see ones with hooks like I've got here. This is a Carter, but what I've done is I've actually modified it. This is a Carter Quickie 1, and I've actually modified it, put a different buckle on it, and done some work to it to make it feel the way I want it to feel. And when you're first starting out, a release, you won't notice the big difference in certain types of releases, but this is how this works. Is it goes on your wrist just like that, nice and tight on your wrist, and buckle that thing down. But as a new shooter, you're not going to notice a huge difference in certain kind of releases, and as you shoot more and more and more and get more in tune with your bow and get more in tune with the way things feel, you're going to notice a certain feel, and you're going to find things you like and find things you don't like. So one of the things first off is setting this up. Again, depending on if you're going to use a wrist style release, you want this to where when you're at full draw, when that thing is fully out, you can actually wrap your finger around it like that. It is suggested that you put your first knuckle around the trigger. So that is how you shoot. If you've got your finger here and you're getting it with the tip of your finger, you probably got too far. Your neck's probably too far out. If you're getting it with the meat of your finger there, well, you're probably a little bit too short. So ideally, you want it to be at full draw. You want to be able to reach up there and comfortably get to that release and be able to push it just like that with the first joint of your finger. So when you're at full draw, it should look just about like that. There's a couple different things that come to picking out a release. You're going to hear things like trigger travel. What trigger travel is you can actually adjust the trigger travel. It's really basically like setting up a gun. My pistol has a certain amount of trigger travel, and I know when I shoot that pistol, I've got to bring my finger back to the breaking point. Very, very similar setup to release. It's going to have so much trigger travel in it, which mine has almost none, before that jaw opens or that release actually sets. Another thing that you're going to have is weight. It's just like anything. This actually has a 4-pound trigger pull on it. A lot of releases are going to come with different springs that you can actually remove the head, and you can put in a different spring, and it's going to increase the weight and the amount of tension you're going to have to put on that release to get it to fire. And I like a heavy trigger. I'm real bad about slapping at the trigger, so I want something I can wrap my finger around and be sure that it's not too sensitive, that when I wrap my finger around it, it's going to go off. I like to have some weight to it so I can go through my motion. When I'm at full draw, I can see I'm squeezing it right now and it's not even moving. And I can actually go ahead and squeeze the shot off properly. It's just what you feel. As you get to shooting, you may end up liking a little less trigger travel. You may end up liking a little less trigger pull as far as the weight. I like a heavy one because I've got real bad problems with target panic. So that's the basics of a wrist strap release. This is what you're going to see most commonly. When you walk into a hunting store, a sporting goods store, you're going to see 90% of them are going to be wrist strap release. So that is your typical hunting release, and that's the typical way of setting it up. Now your next most popular release is going to be called a T-handle release. This is a hot shot vapor, and you can see this one actually works just like that. Jaws open and close on this thumb release. Some T-handles have index finger, some have ring finger, but majority of them are going to be thumb activated releases, unless they're a back tension, which we'll show you in just a minute. But you can see as I move the trigger, jaw opens up. So with this one, some of them are going to have swiveling heads too, so you can actually pull back with your hand in this position. But with this one, does not have a swiveling head. As you pull back, you come to your anchoring position. What I like to do is put my thumb right there and actually squeeze the shot off using my pinky and my ring finger on the other on the outside of my hand. So as I pull it back, you can see it rotates that thumb, that trigger right around, and activates that thing without actually sitting there and doing this. So that's how I like to activate it, is by doing that. Thumb releases, a lot of guys, you're going to see a lot of competition shooters shooting these. You're going to see some hunters shooting these. I know quite a few that actually do, as a matter of fact. But a lot of guys are gonna shoot these for hunting and 3D, and they're a very accurate release, and they're a very nice release if you can get comfortable with them. Some people just can't, have been shooting index finger release for so long they can't get comfortable with these. But that is a T-handle release. Really doesn't offer you a whole lot of benefits over an index finger release or a wrist strap release. You know, other than you can put it on your bow and just let it go. The other thing is, if you're like me and you've developed bad habits with this finger as far as slapping at the trigger, it's a good alternative to that, because as I said, you can pull it back. You can actually activate it with your ring and your pinky. So you can actually activate it just like that. So it's just another method of going through the proper shot sequence. This is a release that you're going to see mostly target shooters shooting. I shoot one, and I do use it hunting, and it has its limitations when it comes to hunting. But this is mostly for target shooters. And what this is a back tension release. You can see right here, this is where it hooks to the string. And as you put your fingers on here, this is a T-handle back tension release. It's got a jaw that's just basically set
It's just a hook that's just set there by tension, and as you rotate this around, it's going to actually fire. So there's no trigger on this, there's no activation with any kind of trigger mechanism. What it does is it forces you to pull back, and as you shoot through and pull your back around, it actually pulls that rest right around and triggers your firing mechanism. Like I said, a lot of guys, target shooters, primarily use these. You're going to see 99% of the guys who shoot these are going to be target shooters. Occasionally you're going to run into a guy like me who's going to shoot one, and they're hard to master, but I had extreme target panic, and this was my solution to target panic, because there's no thumb trigger to hit, there's no index finger trigger to hit, and it actually is, when it's properly done, it is a 100% complete surprise when this goes off. So I actually pull through, I settle into my anchoring position, get my sight on there, and as I'm doing, I rotate my elbow around, and it actually just releases that hinge and makes it fire. So it works just like that. Like I said, primarily a target shooter is going to shoot the back tension release, but if you have a target panic issue where you're really slapping the trigger and punching at the trigger rather than firing or executing your shot properly, this is a good solution to that if you can master it. Okay, so when it comes to selecting sights, you're going to run into a huge variety of sights out there. So I'm going to show you some of those different sights. Everything I'm going to show you here today is going to be Trophy Ridge. I love Trophy Ridge. Very bright sights, very good sights, reliable sights, built like a tank. Never had an issue with Trophy Ridge, and that's why I use them. So there are some components to a sight that's pretty much universal. You're going to have fiber optic on your sights, which is basically what makes them glow. You're going to see the fiber coming right out of the back of these pins and wrapping around the housing. One of the nice things about the Trophy Ridge sights, they all have a lot of fiber optics to them, and that's what you're going to want to look for a bright sight. You want a lot of fiber optic, and you can see these ones come out, actually wrap around the housing a couple times, and then come over here to this slot where I can actually install a light right there and will shine directly on the fiber optics and really make those pins glow. So you're going to have fiber optics on almost all the sights that you find, and you're going to want as many fiber optics as you can. They're usually going to say so many feet of fiber optics. So more fiber optics, the brighter it is. You're also going to have what they call a windage adjustment, or your left and right adjustment. You can see this one up here, and most of them are going to be up here. You're going to loosen this knob right here. You're going to take and you're going to just adjust this side right here, and that's going to move it left and right on your windage. You may end up having a sight that does not have the micro adjust or the toolless adjustment on the top, and if you run into that, you may have to take an Allen wrench and loosen this up with an Allen wrench and actually just slide the thing manually. So a little bit harder to set up, but you're going to have basically the same thing. The next thing you're going to have to adjust is going to be your elevation. Same way with it. You got a knob right here on this Cypher 5. You're going to loosen that knob. You're going to adjust your elevation right here. Your elevation is going to be your up and down. So on a site that does not have this toolless adjustment, like I said, you may have to loosen this with an Allen wrench, and you may have to manually move that up and down. Most of the sites are going to have windage and elevation marks on those. So whenever you go to sight it in, you're going to have a mark, and you're going to know if you need to move it to the left. You're going to have a mark to where it was setting, and you're going to move it to the next mark, to the mark after that, and so on and so on. So definitely look for one with a lot of fiber optic, and look for one with windage and elevation marks. So you definitely need those. Another thing that every site is going to have, it may be a little bit different configuration depending on the site, is it's going to be drilled and tapped in the back. If it's a slider site, it may be drilled and tapped on the base, and you may end up having to have a special adapter, which most of the slider sites are going to come with. And what these holes are for is actually just to mount your quiver up. You're going to have a quiver. Your quiver is going to have a mounting block. You're going to put it right there. It's going to actually attach to that section of your sight, and the quiver is going to be on your bow here. Now they also do make two-piece quivers, and with those they generally mount directly to the riser. Your riser is going to have a cutout here and a cutout up here, and a two-piece riser or two-piece quiver is going to mount there. But your sight is always going to have these holes that are drilled and tapped, and that is to mount your quiver.
So let's talk about the different kinds of sights. All these different sights are going to have different sizes of sight housings. You can see the sight housing is right here. This section right here of the sight is the sight housing, and basically it's the housing that goes around your sight pins. And with different size sight housings is going to determine the size of the peep that you use. Because what you want is your when you're at full draw and you're looking through your peep, you're going to see the inside circle of your peep, and the best way to be the most accurate is to line up the inside circle of that peep with the outside of your sight housing. So if you have a 2-inch sight housing, you may need a 1/4 inch peep. If you have an 1 5/8 sight housing, you may need something like a 3/16. So that is going to be determination of the size of the sight housing is going to determine the size of the peep sight you need. And generally they're going to have on the package the size of the sight housing. And I like a 2-inch sight housing because it's nice and big, and that way I can use a really big peep. So in those low light situations when I got a deer in front of me, I got the most light. Well, with that, the combination of the big peep and the fiber optics on these Trophy Ridge sights, when it's dark I can see my pins, especially with the light on, and I can take that shot at the final few minutes of daylight. Now, the different types of sights, there are a few different types of sights, and the one you're going to see the most is going to be like this Cypher 5. It is a multi-pin adjustable sight. Each pin in here is going to be adjustable. Multi-pin, you can have 3, you can have 5, you can have 7, or and maybe more. I do have some guys who have customized their sights and had more than that. But each pin is going to be adjustable, as we talked about in our sighting in section. You're going to have, like this one is the Cypher 5, so I have 5 individual pins in here that I can adjust the elevation on these things. This is a multi-pin adjustable sight. The left and right is going to be a gang adjustment. It means they're all going to come out and they're all going to be even, and then you're going to make the left and right adjustments up here. Multiple pin adjustable sight. So this is the Cypher 5 pin. You're going to see a lot of these out there. Another one, and this is another Trophy Ridge, and this is what I actually use and actually prefer. I've got several of these and I really like them. This is a Trophy Ridge React. Same basic concept as your multiple pin adjustable sight. The one thing with this one is it actually uses a mathematic algorithm to set your sights. You sight in your 20 by using your gang adjustment, and then when you're ready to sight in your 30, you actually use an adjustment that adjusts your pin gap. So you can see here, as I turn that, the pins are getting wider. So as I sight in my 20 and I sight in my 30, it automatically sights in my 40, my 50, and my 60. And this is the Trophy Ridge React, and that is React technology. They have a 5 pin of this, they have a 3 pin of this, they have a solo pin of this. So I like the React. It has definitely made me more accurate. Once I sight in my 20 and sight in my 30, my 40, 50, and 60 on this 5 pin sight are automatically adjusted for me according to the algorithm of this sight. And what this does is it uses the speed of your bow. So the faster bow you have, the smaller that pin gap's going to be. The slower bow you have, the wider that pin gap's going to be. And there is a set limit to the speed of this. The bow has to be shooting so fast for this to work, and it can't be exceeding a certain speed because it will actually bring this up. But as an adult, I believe the speed is 250 up to like 350 or something like that. But it has a huge range to it, so be sure to check that out before you buy the React sight. But it has a big range to it, and this is what I actually use and actually have had a lot of success with it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 React sights now, and I love them. It's definitely a good, reliable sight. Now the next kind of sight you're going to see is going to be a single pin slider. Same concept on this thing as far as adjusting your windage. Your windage is going to adjust in a gang adjustment like that. This is going to have a single pin in here. So you're going to want to look for, again, as much fiber optic as you can. It's going to have a left and right adjustment to it. Your elevation is actually going to be set with this knob and with this slider mechanism. So what you're going to do is you're going to sight your left and right in, and that's never going to change. You're going to, if your bow's tuned properly, you're going to sight your 20 yard in as far as your elevation goes, and you're actually going to make a mark. Now you're going to step back to 30. You're going to sight that as your elevation goes. You're going to make a mark. 40, 50, 60, so on. You're going to make a mark, and for each yardage you're going to have to loosen this up and adjust it to the proper yardage, lock it back down. The nice thing about this is you have less pins, so a little less confusion there. The other nice thing is you can dial this thing into exact yardages. What I like to do is sight my 20 yard in, then I can sight my 30 yard in, then I can go back and I can actually sight my 25 yard pin in and make a mark there. And I can actually shoot at 26, 27, 28, and I can dial that in precisely. And at from 20 to 30 really doesn't make a huge difference, but when you get from 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, a couple of yards is going to make a huge difference. So this is a single pin slider. A lot of guys use these for target sites. A lot of guys use these for hunting because you can really specify, get really specific with the yardage. You can really go from 25 to 27, from 30 to 32, and like I said, it really gets critical at that farther range. If you're shooting at 50 yards, this is a lot more accurate than some of the single pin or some of the multiple pin adjustable sights, because you actually don't have to do any guessing. You can actually get this thing dialed into that specific yardage. The disadvantage is in a hunting situation, you have to move it. So if you've got an animal in front of you, you do have to make a movement, and sometimes you end up making a judgment call anyway because you have this thing set at 35, the deer's at 37, so you got to make a little bit of compensation as well. But if you can get this thing moved like a target setting, or if you can get it moved to the proper yardage in a hunting situation, they are very, very accurate. The next sight that we've got for you here is a single pin target sight, and this one actually is the Clutch from Trophy Ridge. It's going to work a lot like your slider. Most of these target sights you're going to see are actually extended out. Most of them are going to be able to take a lens, so you can actually, like on this one, you can unscrew this housing here. You can put a lens in there and you can actually magnify your target. So these have second axis adjustment, third axis adjustments. They actually dial in on the side, and you'll see you've got a really, really fine marker on the side, and it's again like the single pin slider. You can dial this thing into an exact yardage, and these are going to be mostly used by target shooters. This Trophy Ridge Clutch is very accurate, and with the second and third axis adjustment, the windage adjustment and everything like that, this thing can really be dialed in and really be made accurate. They're built like tanks. Most of these things are target sights are built very, very well, and you can see this thing has dials, it has marks, it has everything you could possibly imagine to make yourself more accurate. These can be used in a hunting situation. You can see it's drilled and tapped for a quiver, so this can be used in a hunting situation. It has the limitations to it, just like the other slider sight, and you have to get it to the yardage. But if you can get it to the yardage in a hunting situation, it is going to be very accurate. In a target situation, you can actually, like I said, remove this, put in a magnifying lens, and at 20 yards, you can have a 4x magnification, so you can actually see that kill zone on the 3D target, or you can see that bullseye on your paper target, and it makes it that much bigger. It's also going to have a single pin, and it's going to have fiber optics on it, so it's very important. It's going to take a light too, because sometimes shooting indoors can be very bright. But this one, like I said, target sight, this is the Clutch, all the bells and whistles. This thing has all the bells and whistles as far as adjustment goes to it, and these can be set up to be very, very accurate. Alright, picking the right stabilizer for your bow can be a challenge, and what I recommend is going to a pro shop. If you walk into Ike's Outdoors, which I don't have my pro shop anymore, but if you walked into my pro shop and had a bow and you're looking for a stabilizer, the first thing I would do is suggest that you pick out the stabilizers that you like. We'll take them back to the range and you try them. So walk into a pro shop. Most of those packages are going to be where they can open them and reseal them up. No big deal. A used stabilizer ain't going to hurt the value, so it ain't no big deal to put a stabilizer back in a package. But if you'll notice in my reviews and in my different hunting videos, I shoot a ton of different bows, and every bow that I shoot has a different stabilizer on it. The idea of the stabilizer is actually to counterbalance your bow. It's going to do a couple different things. It's going to counterbalance all the top weight on your bow from your sight and everything like that. It's going to make your bow more steady at full draw. So it also, that's the reason stabilizer, it's called a stabilizer. The other thing it also does is a lot of the shock's transferred to the handle of your bow when you shoot. With today's bows, the shock, the vibration is really not that bad, but the other thing a stabilizer is going to do is actually absorb a little bit of that vibration. The weight, some of them are going to have rubber on here, like this one, got rubber all over the end. It's going to absorb a little bit of the vibration from the shock. But the things that are going to make that are important to a stabilizer are the length and the weight, as well as the weight distribution. Every bow that I shoot with a different stabilizer, and even if I don't shoot a different stabilizer, I may shoot with a different weight. This is a bow finger stabilizer. Both of these are bow finger stabilizers. This is their Hunter series, and this is an 8-inch version. They also have a couple of different lengths to this thing, so you can find the proper length for your bow that feels the best to you. The nice thing about this stabilizer, and what I almost have to have this for me, is an adjustability to the weight. This Hunter stabilizer has different brass weights. You can see I've got two missing here that I've actually just taken off. I've been putting this on my Elite, and with my Elite it feels better with these two weights taken off the stabilizer. So this is the 8-inch version. On some bows, the 6-inch version feels better. On some bows, the 8-inch version feels really good, but I want to add those two weights, or I want to take all the weights off. My hunting bow last year, my RPM 360, I actually took all the weights off of it. I shot this thing with just this end section right here. So weight can be very important. I like a stabilizer that has adjustability to the weights. Some are going to have brass weights like that. Some are going to have, I got weights on the back here. Some are going to have just weight systems that go to it. These are all individual weights that I can add and remove to some of the bow finger stabilizers. So I almost have to have a adjustable weight system on my stabilizers. So it's important for your length. It's important for weight. Now the other thing we're going to talk about is weight distribution. You can get these things, of course, like this one has weight all the way out on the end. You can get these things that also have weight throughout, and that is just a personal preference. I like my weight to be a little bit further out away from my hand. It just really works for me. You may like one that has no weight on the end of it and has the weight closer to the bow. So that is another thing to consider whenever you're picking out a stabilizer. So you got a lot of different types of stabilizers. You can see both of these are made by Bowfinger. This is the Savage. I really like the Savage as well because the weight distribution is large. It's out here farther away from the bow. You can see this is a little bit longer stabilizer than the Hunter. So the weight is actually out a little bit farther away from me. I've got dampeners on here. Those add just a little bit of weight as well. I've got weight here, and the weight is actually spread out in a larger surface area than what I've got on this Rogue. So that's gives me another completely different feel to the bow than the Rogue does because of the weight distribution and the length. So it's very important whenever you're picking a stabilizer to pick the right length and to pick the right weight and to pick the right weight distribution. It's another one of those things that I have a ton of stabilizers, and I love these Bowfinger stabilizers. I use them on almost all my bows, and one of the reasons I use Bowfingers is because they have the weight system on them, and it allows me to change the weight system. But I have a ton of different stabilizers because every bow that I shoot, I have a different preference to the stabilizer that goes on it. So the best advice that I can give you is, one, either come over here and use my stabilizers and try them out, or find some shop that will let you try their stabilizers. Take your bow in there, put the stabilizers on it, and actually go back and fling a few arrows with it and get the feel for that stabilizer on that particular bow. You may love a stabilizer in a 6-inch version, you may hate it in the 8-inch version. You may love the Savage and take all the weights off of it and hate it. It is that little minute of adjustment can make a huge difference in the stabilizer and the way the bow feels. Like I said, I use this Rogue on a lot of my bows, and I take the weights and adjust the weights to each one of the bows. So go to your local pro shop and try out all the stabilizers that you can on your particular bow. This section is going to show you how to build an arrow. The one thing I'm not going to show you is how to cut an arrow. And because I'm not going to show you that because of safety reasons, obviously, and because my saw may be different than yours. So if you've bought a saw, just consult your owner's manual. It'll show the proper way to use your arrow saw. I have a homemade arrow squaring device here that I made. All this is a block of nylon that we had at work, and I've machined a groove in the center of it, machined a block here, and I've put some sandpaper on the end. So after you cut your arrow, before you install your insert, first thing you're going to want to do is square this up. Which normally I got this bolted down, but it just didn't look great on camera. So what you're going to do is have this bolted down to a table. You're going to put this in here, and all you're going to do is simply turn it. And it's just going to flatten your end where your saw got it, you know, may have cut it a little bit crooked or left a little bit of a jagged edge. So that's pretty much it. Once that's done, your arrow is square, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to clean this up. For that, you're going to take a little bit of alcohol and a Q-tip, and just put a little bit of alcohol on your Q-tip and just run that right down in there just like that, and it'll usually bring back, this arrow's been cut a while back, but that will bring back a bunch of debris usually down in there. If you've got one that has old glue in it like this one, where the insert actually fell out, what you need to do then is, I got a brush here. This is just a 22 caliber brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it in there, in and out, and that's going to get all that old glue out of there. If you're using a new arrow, you don't necessarily need to do this, but if you're using one like this one that the insert's actually falling out, it's probably a good idea. So after I get that all done, I'm going to swab it out again. Just a little bit of alcohol. You can see got a lot more debris out of there that time. Going to dry this thing out. Now for this part, what we're going to use is going to use a 2-part epoxy. I like the 2-part epoxy. It's what I prefer because it's got a little bit of give to it, and it seems to handle the impact of shooting an arrow the best. I have seen guys use Gorilla Glue, which I don't really like because it expands, and I've also seen guys use super glue or goat tough, any of that stuff, any cyanoacrylate glue that sets up quickly is going to be okay for this as well. If you're going to use this, I recommend you to get a tool like this one right here, which we're going to use it this time, but you don't necessarily have to with a 2-part epoxy. If you're going to use the super glue, putting these things in here, it sets up instantly. So once you get your super glue on your insert, when you go to put it up, I've had them actually set up on me like that. So what this does is it gives you some leverage and gives you a little bit more control. When you use super glue, actually put that thing on there and push fast. I mean, push that thing in there just like that, or you'll get stuck halfway and then you'll be in trouble. So what we're going to use today is going to be the 2-part epoxy. Okay, so I've got the 2-part epoxy mixed up just on a piece of cardboard, and you can see there, got a little dab on the end of that. With the 2-part epoxy, I don't have to really worry about it taking a lot of time. What I'm going to do with it is I'm actually just going to put it in there just like that, and I'm going to give this a good turn, 360 degrees or so, and knock my fletching jig over. I'm just going to take a shop towel, and I'm going to wipe off the excess epoxy that I have. Now with this part, you're going to want to hold the insert and take that off. Now when you're using 2-part epoxy, you don't necessarily need that tool. You can do it with a field tip, you can do it with your fingers. The important thing to remember is if you go ahead and put a field tip in this, like a lot of guys will use a field tip and then just go ahead and insert that in there with the field tip, don't set it like this, because if you do, the field point can actually drag that thing out of there just a little bit and can actually pull your insert out of the arrow. So if you're using a 2-part epoxy and not a quick set glue, always set them up just like that. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and fletch this arrow. Okay, when it comes to fletching an arrow, having it clean is one of the most important things. This arrow, like it's actually been fletched before, and you can see there's some residue left behind. But even if you're using a brand new arrow, there can be dust built up on this, and there can be oils and stuff like that. So it's very important that you have a clean arrow. So what I'm going to use is I got 91% isopropyl alcohol. I like it because it won't damage the arrow and it evaporates fast. So I got a generous amount on there, and I'm just going to actually take that and wipe it right down the shaft until I hear that. That's the sound of a nice, clean arrow shaft. And then before I start doing any glue, and I'm going to dry that all off, just like that. So now that we have that done, and that's the reason why we use alcohol. This thing's already bone dry. So choice of fletching jig is entirely up to you. I use a Martin fletching jig because I don't do a whole lot of fletching. They're cheap, they're reasonable, but you can see the glue buildup on my clamp here. This is just a straight clamp, and I've got my jig set up with a little bit of an offset. If you're going to be doing a lot of arrows, or you're only going to buy one jig, then I recommend a Bitzenberg. They're made out of aluminum, and the clamp can be cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned, and they are actually some of the best clamps on the market. If you're like me, I do an arrow every now and then. Now that I'm not running a shop, these Martin jigs are going to be fine. Every 5-6 years I buy some new clamps, so that you do have to think about that if you're going to buy plastic. So all we're going to do here is we're going to insert our arrow right there and make sure it is down in the fletching jig properly. I always like to turn mine to make sure I'm sitting on there and it will actually turn. On your fletching jig, you're going to have a bunch of different marks. Find the right mark for you. I like to put mine about 1 inch up from the base, which for me is this mark right here. So I'm going to be using some 3-inch fusion veins. I'm going to use 2 pink and 1 black. So I'm going to line this up, my first vein, right there with that bottom mark. I'm going to try to get it as close as possible. Now, when it comes to choice of glue, any cyanoacrylate glue is going to be fine. I like Loctite super glue. It's cheap. I can buy it at the dollar store, and it does a really, really good job of holding up. Some of your other stuff out there, Goat Tough and things like that, you know, they're good glues, and they work really good. I'm not against them. This is just what I use. You can use whatever you want. I like this one here too because I can really control it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a nice little bead right here on the base of this vein, and then I'm going to put it down on there. Don't get too much on here, because if it squeezes out the side, it really makes a mess. When you go to put this on here, the best way to put it on is actually to put on the bottom first, just like that. You're going to fold it right into the magnet, and it'll suck it right down, and then you can push it right on there. Now, at this point, I give it just a small squeeze, just like that, on both ends. I don't want to squeeze it too much, because I don't want the glue running out everywhere. But that's what I want to do. And you can see in here, I don't have an excessive amount of glue. I don't have glue coming out all over the place. I know I probably won't have glue coming out on the back. That's about the right amount of glue. That way you don't have it spewing all over the place. And on these plastic ones, you definitely do not want to get glue down in here, because if you get glue down in there, this jig's pretty much ruined. One of the great things about using super glue is just how fast it is. When you do your second and your third vein, it's pretty much going to be the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and install my vein in my clamp, and I'm going to get it lined up with that same mark I lined my other one up with. Now, before I put any glue on this, I'm going to put it right on there, dry, and just do a dry fit and see how it fits up. And I don't know if the camera can see it or not, but the bottom of my black vein is down here. The bottom of my pink vein is up there, so I need to make an adjustment. That's the main thing when it comes to building an arrow, is just getting those things lined up. Building an arrow is really easy, and even if you get them off a little bit, it really ain't that big of a deal. But getting them lined up nice just makes the arrow pretty and makes it look a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and put another bead of glue on there, just like the first time. And I'm going to approach it the same way. I'm going to put my bottom end first, and just roll the clamp into the magnet, and then I'm going to push it down onto the arrow shaft. Give it a little squeeze, and there we go. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all there is to fletching an arrow and building an arrow. My insert's installed and ready to go. My arrow's all fletched up and ready to shoot. Now, one thing I will do, especially if I'm shooting out of a whisker biscuit, is when this is all said and done, I'll take my glue and I'll put just a little drop right there in the front of each one of these veins. That's just to keep that front end from coming up as it goes through the whisker biscuit and peeling those veins off. So that's about it. I make this look pretty easy, but keep in mind, when I was an apprentice in a archery shop, I literally fletched thousands and thousands and thousands of arrows. I'm pretty sure I'm in the 5,000 arrow range now. So a little bit of practice and you can get really good at this. It's really not that complicated. It's one of those things that's just go out and do it. You know, once you get the hang of it, it's easy. And if you're like me, you know, it's something that you'll do and you'll enjoy until you've built 5,000 or 6,000 of them. But it's nice to build your own arrows. Take a little bit of pride in it, and you can customize them the way you want them, and really take some pride in your work. So that's all there is to building your own arrow.